Hi, I am Bruce Nellsmith, your professor for Painting 1. This is Part A. I am also the cinematographer and the star of this pitiful show, so there might be some rough transitions in this, but let's get started with it. This is our source, and it is to be considered only a source. It is a jumping off place for our painting. And here is our canvas that we'll be working on. All of us will be working with a 16 by 20 canvas. And we will start with a drawing. I am a believer in keeping the drawing as simple as is reasonably possible for an acrylic painting. The reason for that is that you will lose that drawing almost immediately when you start laying paint into the canvas. A very good place to start in a landscape especially, although I will use the idea of a horizon line in many works, even things that are interiors, etc. But the horizon line is a good place to start the image because it will orient you in the painting. Let's drop back up to the painting for a moment. Painting is here. Horizon line, in this case, which is a beach scene, the horizon line is going to be all the way back along the horizon of the water that you see in the background. That'll be our horizon line. In terms of a drawing for this, we will only be making drawing marks, as few as possible, of the largest shapes. After our horizon line's in, we'll be looking for very large, broad shapes. This pathway running back into the background, paying particular note to the fact that it is wide in the foreground and it gets narrower and narrower and narrower as it moves back in space. Back to our canvas. Starting with the horizon line is just above the halfway mark. And then from there we will work with clump of trees back here that drops down a little below the horizon line, and we're going to deal with it as all one shape. To the left hand side we have more trees, and we're just going to deal with the largest shapes. Pathway leading back almost hits the corner. Very narrow in the background. It widens as it comes towards you. I'm going to strengthen my drawing marks a little, although I want to make a point at this stage that you should draw as lightly as you can, because sometimes graphite will bleed into the painting, so you don't need very dark drawing marks. It's just to make sure you can see what I've drawn in here. We'll put a few of these tree trunks in just so we don't forget they're there. And the grassy areas, it might be a good idea to just kind of indicate that they're leading down to the path. I don't think really in this particular painting I would do much more. I took my pathway back into the ocean right there, so I've got to stop it sooner. All right. Ocean pathway. All right. That's all the drawing that I would get involved in for this particular painting. Let's go down to the palette. We are using some Sennelier paint. It doesn't come in tubes, it comes in these pouches. Very nice because this is clear plastic and you can actually see the pigment color. That's what you're looking at here, not a printed on image. We're only going to be working in the sky space initially, so we're only going to put out the paint that we need for the sky space. And I have purple, and I have a primary blue, close to a phthalo blue, and then white. Put a little paint out on the palette. I will normally put white out in more than one place on the palette. Because as you're mixing, you lose the purity of that white very quickly. Put a little blue out. Note that I'm not putting a lot of paint on the palette. 16 by 20 is not a big canvas. It takes very, very little. This paint is highly concentrated. Made in Paris, still made in Paris, and is beautiful paint. You have at your disposal 3 brushes. You have a 3/4 inch flat, you have a 1/2 inch flat, you have a point. We're going to begin this painting with the 3/4 inch flat. It is generally a good idea to use the largest brush you can use in the painting for as long as you can reasonably use it. You wouldn't paint a wall in your house using this. No, you'd be looking for something that's wide, cover a lot of ground quickly. Same goes for the painting. We're not going to be mixing paint for the painting, pre-mixing paint, I should say. We're going to feel around for what we want with the brush on the palette. This very common way of painting for Edward Monet, for instance. According to some observers, he simply put the paint out on the palette and then he felt around on it for the mixtures that he desired in the painting. He didn't pre-mix for those paintings. So let's we're looking down at the palette here, and my my approach, I can't go back and forth between this and the palette constantly, but my approach will be this: to look around for something that I need. And if I need a a tint of blue, I might be using some some darker shades of blue. Not really a shade because I don't have anything to shade it with here on the palette, but darker tints and lighter tints and etc. So we're going to start this painting with blue with a little white in it, and there's very little water in this brush. Water is not the medium in acrylic painting. Acrylic polymer is. Water's there for you to rinse in and to make the paint flow a little better. So with the damp brush, the brush only needs to be damp. And we're in the sky space. You can work very quickly because we're working in the area that is kind of behind the clouds. And you can see that you're going to begin to lose your drawing very, very rapidly. So there's no sense in putting a lot of effort into that drawing. Your drawing is just sort of a map of where things are. And I'm trying to just fill the blue sky at this point. There is blue peeking through in some places. You can overpaint this, but the blue is peeking through in some places between these trees. And so we're going to get a little bit of that in here. So that as we paint that foliage in over the top of this, that blue sky will be back in there behind it already. Generally, with acrylic acrylic or oil paint, you work from dark to light, and we will continue to do that. Brush is getting a little dry. I don't want it wet, but I do want it damp. And we are working as rapidly as we can here. Feeling around on the palette for just this tint of blue that I want. Don't want it too dark. I want to keep a lot of light in this painting, because that's what's really carrying the painting, is this nice feeling of highlight in it. Going down to my horizon line. Sort of got the ground in now, the general blue of the sky. In this painting, I was looking for a little activity in the sky, a little excitement. So there are clouds, things like that up there. We're going to shift the tints around a little bit. Now I have just pure white. Most likely all this blue is still very wet, so initially, because I'm working wet paint into wet paint, I'm going to obviously get a little softness, which is nice in here. I would like for this horizon line to have a real light character to it, because I think that light out there on the horizon is something that pulls you into the painting. So we're going to keep it pretty light. I'm only using white paint at this point. It is coming off as something that is a tint of blue, simply because all of that blue paint on the surface of this canvas right now is still pretty wet. But that is giving me this opportunity for some soft areas in these clouds. And it does help if you'll choke back on the brush, because we don't really want to see this too regular. If you choke back on the brush, it's going to obviously affect your control a little bit, and that will be an advantageous thing in this painting, especially in the sky space up here. So I'm choked pretty far back on this brush to make sure that I don't try to illustrate a cloud, but I make marks that lend themselves to being read as clouds. Now I'm going to shift my blue a little bit. Let's see if we can get back down here at the palette. Hopefully. I'm going to shift the blue. I haven't rinsed this brush yet. I don't rinse brushes often. I want this blue now to run to something that is a little warmer, so I'm going to use purple to warm this up a little bit. And I'm going to go in underneath the clouds with this mixture, okay? So let me make sure I'm on the painting here again. Yes. So I'm using this warmer blue that I have obtained from mixing a little purple into it, and I'm going to run underneath these clouds, and then that will give them volume. It's going to make them a little more three-dimensional. Clouds are three-dimensional, so they have volume, and they have weight. But it's visual weight, okay? They had actual weight that just fall to the ground, I suppose, you know, and you could go out there and play in them, but they do have volume and weight.